It's your boy, the Black Anglo-Saxon, your favorite political scientist. Maybe not your favorite, but I'm here with another episode of From the Hood to the Hill. And today we're going to be talking about second screens. I saw this interesting article from The Guardian that I thought was pretty intriguing. It talks about the business model of creating movies for people to watch or not watch. And I thought was very important because, as I always talk about on this channel, the mechanizations of business models and how those business models impact and lead us down a path to destruction based on institutional protocol. Because I don't think businesses and people are inherently evil, but this is another example of what I mean by business models creating and wreaking havoc in ways that they don't understand. Similarly to how I always talk about how the comms and communications industry has created this environment where people have begun to mistake brevity for clarity because everything is done in 2 minutes or 30-minute sound bites. And that's how people have come to consume content. And so people having to deal with complex issues and things of that matter, whether they be in books or whether they be in movies, which we'll get into later, people have a hard time actually synthesizing the information and the data that they are interacting with. And I think this move that Netflix and other companies have made is going to add on to that. Now, I may be wrong. I'm always open for it. Again, y'all can always leave a comment, a like, or share. I'm not above anybody or anything, but I think I'm spot on with this one. I really do. I really do. Because literacy rates are in hell. And I think that doing things like this, which I'm about to show you, add on and compound on to the actual problem in itself, Because just because you can read a lot of books don't mean you're kind of getting anything from it. And that's what we're about to get into, So go ahead, let me pull this up real. So this is from The Guardian. I like The Guardian. They produce good stuff. So I'm going to go ahead. This article is 6 months old, as y'all can see. So, not second screen enough. Is Netflix deliberately dumbing down TV so people can watch while scrolling? Streamers insiders have claimed they're being made to rewrite scripts for viewers who use their phones while watching. Is this the end of quote unquote prestige TV or pure fiction? So it says, be honest, how much attention do you pay when you watch TV? If you're familiar with the ritual of half watching a series or a film, Netflix is in the background while you check out your arch enemy, just as you posted on Instagram. It may surprise you to hear that Netflix doesn't know you engage in this obscene behavior. It actually wants you to carry on. The streamer in the news recently, thanks to an excellent piece by Will Tavlin in N+1, which reminded readers of the platform's micro genre of casual viewing, TV shows and movies designed to be watched while something else is being done. One paragraph in particular incited a great deal of frustration. Tavlin claimed that Netflix had told various screenwriters to have their protagonists announce what they're doing so that viewers who have this program on in the back can follow along. Unsurprisingly, this results in atrocious dialogue like the following from the Lindsay Lohan film Irish Wish, where it says, "We spent the day together," Lohan tells her fictitious lover James. "I admit it was a beautiful day filled with the dramatic vistas and romantic rain, but that doesn't give you the right to question my life choices. Tomorrow, I'm marrying Paul Kennedy." "Fine," he responds. "That will be the last of you see of me because after this job is over, I'm off to Bolivia to photograph an endangered tree lizard." It is inherently bad to cater to people who may prefer their viewing on a more casual side. Why do you say? It is snobbery to believe that TV must demand all of our attention all of the time. Is it? It isn't breaking news that Netflix panders to the casual viewer, as well as the award-winning TV hit produce Baby Reindeer. The streamer has a history of telling showrunners that scenes aren't second screen enough. In other words, if viewers' primary screen is their phone, they shouldn't be so challenged by Netflix show on their secondary screen that they switch to the show off. Above all else goes the cynical view. Netflix just wants you to have its visual muzak playing for as long as possible. Now, let me go ahead. Why is this a problem? Why is this a problem? Just off of what I read so far. Now, I always talk about institutional protocol. Institutional protocol, again, being a set out series of behaviors that lead to a desired outcome. I always talk about selling something in the store because, again, the person or the salesperson may not necessarily know the actual formula, but they get taught on how to pitch. They get taught on who to sell it to, the demographic, and all of these different pieces that go into a sale, making a sale. They don't have to understand the actual protocols themselves. The protocols are set up to have a potential outcome. Now, why it matters in this case? Because essentially what Netflix and other companies are saying, because people will follow this model because this model makes money. Because what essentially will happen is if everything is about viewership and adship, and as they mentioned, keeping you on the screen, I don't actually need you to watch it. And I also don't necessarily actually want to incentivize you to watch it. I actually want to put you into a space where your attention is split. Now, that may sound harmless, but over time, when you continue to split your attention, when you continue to engage in this behavior, it doesn't just happen now when you're dealing with Netflix. You do it with your friends at dinner because now you're on your phone and you're listening or kind of listening to a conversation that maybe your friend is having over dinner. And because you think that you have done this with Netflix or Hulu or whoever has created these companies who have created these business models have introduced to us, you now have implemented it throughout your life. We already do this in a number of ways, but I think when people turn it and make it and put it into a business model, it takes on and creates a life of its own. Now, this also, unfortunately, impacts literacy. This also, and people will say, well, how does it impact literacy? Because you have to factor in and layer onto what makes for good literacy rates. Now, you need an attention span, focus, and discipline to build literacy. Why? Because reading a book and consuming long form and consuming certain material is like mental reps, right? When I was in college, the content that they used to make us read and the stuff that I used to have to read, my head felt like it was splitting. Over time, though, it became easy. So when you are consuming mass amounts of information, it's not as hard for me anymore to wake up at 6 o'clock and read 6 articles or consume certain content because I am used to consuming everything in a long form. I prefer C-SPAN over CNN because it is raw, unedited, and stripped down. When you are being fed things that have the glitz, the glam, and it's done in 2 minutes and you can kind of leave it on and then you come back 30 minutes later and you still feel like you are caught up in the plot line, you will begin to treat your life like that. Which is why we've lost control or lost any semblance of what the plot actually is as society. Because we're constantly being fed platforms, models that either dumb down the attention span. Again, having people confusing brevity, shortness with clarity, having people miss and confuse actual precision. And no, I don't want to say that. That's the wrong choice of words. Because people do this thing where they'll confuse idioms or statements of wisdom, but don't necessarily have the wherewithal to put it in its proper context. So you'll have a statement like, you catch more bees with honey, and people love to say that without understanding the context of first what it means to catch something. Because if you're being caught, then what is that? Who said it? And what in what world was it being said in? And how does it interplay with everything that's going on? And how are people using it? And so there's a lot of different things that people, again, like to feed into, but don't necessarily understand the full context of what it is. And you get that because, again, we're given things like this. And I think this is why it's very, very bad, and we should pause when we are actually being fed business models that are built on destructive behaviors under the layers of what's being said. Because on its face, it sounds innocent. It's just like, I mean, nobody cares. Like, I mean, it's Netflix. The movies are kind of cheesy, like Zeus or Tubi. All of that stuff is kind of cheesy. And I think Tubi has kind of taken that business model and ran off with it because all of their movies are garbage for that reason. And I think that's why we even liked Sinners as much as we did, because again, it's one of those simple plot lines. It's not real. It's not as deep as people wanted to make it seem. But here we are. These reports may catastrophize a niche problem. 3 writers who have written for Netflix tell me they have never received notes like this from the company. Danny Brocklehurst, who has written several Harlan Coben TV adaptations, hand on heart, nobody puts any pressure on us from Netflix to make anything simplistic or that you can watch while you're scrolling through your phone or whatever. Brocklehurst thinks it's unfair to characterize the company as one that is simply dumbing down. I would be surprised if any exec was basically like, write this badly, says Joe Barton, who has written shows like Jerry, Haji, and Black Doves for Netflix. I don't think there's a sort of homogenized Netflix. It's a huge company with many different departments, but writers can't help but be aware that their audience is consuming shows in different ways. James Hamilton has been head writer on the animated Netflix shows Dog in Space and Gentry Child versus the Underworld. I think it's okay to be mindful of how social media has mashed everyone's attention spans to a pulp, he says. We'd be lying to ourselves if we didn't admit that most of us find it hard to put our phones down when the TV is on. And we all get distracted very easily. But I'd be very concerned if any exec I was working with was actively trying to give our audience permission to pay less attention. Brocklehurst, who admits he might be more old school, does have much time for the argument that narrative TV should be consumed while on in the background. I hate the idea that people are watching anybody's shows, and certainly my shows, with a phone in their hand, scrolling, texting, commenting on the show, maybe on Twitter, he says. Just watch it. You make the television so people will complete it because it's good and they enjoy it and they want to watch it. What you do is make it so simple that it's just like chewing gum. And that's why people think they can walk and chew gum at the same time. People always say that. But I always say I haven't seen people walk and chew gum. And we done lost it. As pop culture writer Ryan Broderick points out, however, the casual viewing phenomenon isn't a modern one. It was actually commonplace before TV entered its second golden era at the turn of the century. Because television storytelling took so many lessons from radio, its dialogue used to be more explanatory. When prestige TV entered the arena early in the 2000s, the medium started inviting comparisons to literature and cinema because of its intricate all consuming qualities. Much like you can't do anything else with reading a novel, you weren't expected to do the washing up while watching The Sopranos. If you're on TikTok or Hinge or whatever and watching The Wire at the same time, says Burton, you'll probably just turn it off. Barton once tried to watch Tinker Tailor Soldier Spy at a baby screen and therefore had no clue what was going on. Also said that the acclaimed shows of TV's golden age didn't necessarily have enormous audience numbers. If you have a bigger audience, you may be forced to explain more in order to include everyone. Shows like The Sopranos, Mad Men, The Wire predate Netflix, were never made to be binged, and may have had more artistic freedom than modern TV dramas. When I emailed the writer of Lohan, starring Irish, Kristen Hansen, for comment, her agent tells me that Netflix never gave Hansen the kind of direction described in Tavlin's piece. How did the endangered tree lizard line come about? There were changes made by the director producing team during the production process. How does Hansen feel about the line now? She's not fazed by it, said her agent. Two other writers of Netflix films declined to comment for this piece. The question may be one of balance. As long as there are shows that can be consumed casually and shows that demand 100% of our attention, things may be all right. There's comfort in having a familiar show or movie in the background that your attention can dip in and out of, says Hamilton. It'd be ludicrous to expect anything to demand everyone's complete rapt attention. But none of that means people cannot pay attention, or the story should be intentionally crafted for people who have the show on in the background. I think there always have been shows that cater to more casual viewing, says Barton, who says he feels terrible about occasional watching while on his phone. So, like, again, what he's saying is they aren't getting that as a direct, explicit directive. But it's institutional protocol. This is what's selling at the moment. We're going to double down on it. We're going to make more of it because this is what's getting us our bang for our buck. And it happens in every industry. Like I said, in the mass comms industry, that's why people always are giving you 2-minute, 30-second clips, because that's what they feel like is going to gain traction. That's what the studies show in terms of the ability and the capacity that people have. And the problem that creates is, like I said in my video about the voter suppression piece, what space does that create for people, us as a society, to solve complex issues that may arise? Because if this is how we're consuming, and this is, again, the brain plasticity and all of that, I'm not a neurosurgeon or any of those type of situations. But what I will say is that, again, studies have shown that the brain is plastic and it conforms and it molds and the neuron pathways adjust based on how you consume, what you do, or what you don't do. So it's like muscle atrophy, right? And so my biggest question is, okay, if we keep consuming in this way, where will we be when we have to face something complicated? Or where will we be when you have to tell your child to sit down and read the Iliad or 1984 or any of the books that require you to sit down, be focused, disciplined, and entrenched in it? Because if that's how you used to consuming content, it's not just as easy to revert back to one and the other. Right? But maybe I'm tripping. Maybe I'm not. I might be wrong. Who knows? I'm just a kid from Southeast. So let me know what y'all think. Hit the like button, hit the share button, leave a comment. And I appreciate y'all for joining me on another episode of From the Hood to the Hill with your favorite political scientist. Maybe not.